All right, get ready to dive deep with us today as we explore Henry David Thoreau's Walden.
That's right, Walden.
And we've got excerpts straight from the book.
We do.
John Updike's introduction is going to add a really interesting perspective, too.
Yeah, his take is, it's pretty unique.
And just to make things even more interesting,
Yeah.
we're also going to take a peek at Thoreau's very detailed expense log.
Oh, yeah. I'm excited to dig into that.
Imagine keeping track of every penny back in 1845.
It's quite a commitment to simple living, right?
Definitely a commitment.
More than just numbers, though.
Right.
These records really bring his philosophy of simple living to life.
Absolutely.
You know, he wasn't just writing about it, he was meticulously living it.
Yeah.
It just makes his insights that much more compelling.
I think so, too. So what are we trying to uncover in this deep dive?
Well...
Basically, what led Thoreau to Walden Pond?
Right.
What choices did he make while he was living there?
Mm-hmm.
And how did that experience shape his view of society?
Yeah, and I think the really interesting thing is, can we in the 21st century relate to this guy?
Right.
This transcendentalist who kind of swore off the rat race over 150 years ago.
Totally, and that's what we're going to try to figure out. I think a good place to start would be one of Thoreau's most well-known statements.
Okay.
He said that most people live lives of quiet desperation.
Yeah, it's a powerful image.
Imagine all those people going through the motions but feeling unfulfilled, you know?
Yeah, just going through the motions.
Just stuck.
Right.
Thoreau felt like they were trapped by societal expectations.
It's easy to feel that way.
Working endlessly without ever stopping to ask themselves if it made them happy.
I think it's important to point out that he wasn't against hard work itself.
No.
I mean, he put in a ton of work building his own cabin and growing his own food.
He did.
His critique was aimed at work that felt pointless, you know?
Right.
The kind of work that keeps us on a treadmill but doesn't really get us anywhere.
Yeah, it's like that image he uses. The farmer endlessly pushing a barn uphill.
Oh, yeah. I love that one.
You can just picture that guy straining and sweating.
But the barn never really moves.
Exactly.
That's what he felt so many people were doing with their lives.
Pushing and pushing.
Burdened by, you know, all their stuff and obligations, but not really getting anywhere.
Not getting any closer to actually feeling fulfilled.
And, you know, he said that people had become tools of their tools.
Interesting.
Meaning they were being used by their possessions instead of the other way around.
I
mean, honestly, haven't we all felt that way at some point?
Oh, for sure.
All that pressure to have the latest gadget, the bigger house, the perfect car.
You telling me.
It can feel like we're serving our stuff instead of it serving us.
That's so true. But before we get too carried away with this idea, John Updike, in his introduction to Walden, offers a different perspective.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he suggests that we should see Walden not as a strict rule book, but more like a spice rack.
A spice rack.
Yeah, like a spice rack.
I like that.
So he's not saying that everyone should abandon their lives to build a cabin in the woods.
No, not at all.
It's about sprinkling in those ideas of simplicity and intentionality into our own lives.
Right, wherever we are and whatever our situation is.
Exactly. So let's dive into the Walden experiment itself.
Okay, let's do it.
Now, Thoreau didn't just, wing it.
No, he did not.
He meticulously planned his move to Walden Pond.
He was prepared.
He built his own cabin, grew his own food, and even kept detailed records of his expenses.
Wow.
This wasn't a random retreat. It was a carefully crafted experiment.
In self-sufficiency.
Exactly.
And the details in that expense log are just fascinating.
They are.
He spent a ridiculously low amount of money on food.
I know.
Like 27 cents a week.
Seriously.
Which is about $9 in today's money.
It's hard to believe.
Can you imagine trying to feed yourself for a week on $9?
No way.
It shows how dedicated he was to simplifying his needs and living within his means.
Right. He was basically living on rye bread potatoes and the occasional salt pork. He even gave up yeast at one point because he decided it wasn't absolutely necessary.
Interesting.
But he didn't seem miserable, did he?
I don't think so.
He found joy in swimming in the pond, watching the wildlife, even just getting lost in thought.
Yeah, like he didn't need fancy things to be content.
Exactly.
Exactly.
It really challenges our idea of what it means to be well off.
It does.
Maybe true wealth isn't about accumulating stuff, but about aligning your actions with your values.
Right.
And finding joy in simple things and appreciating nature.
Yeah, I like that.
And this leads us to one of Thoreau's most powerful messages, self-reliance.
Self-reliance.
Yeah, he rejected the traditional career path.
Uh-huh.
And devoted himself to his passions, studying, writing, and connecting with nature.
He really walked the walk.
He did.
He famously said, To maintain oneself on this earth is not a hardship, but a pastime if we will live simply and wisely.
That's a great quote.
So basically, he believed that a fulfilling life isn't about what society expects of us.
Right.
It's about pursuing what we love and living in harmony with nature.
And to illustrate this idea of self-reliance,
Okay.
he tells this great story about an Indian basket maker.
Interesting.
So picture this: Thoreau meets this really skilled craftsman
Yeah.
who's having trouble selling his baskets.
His beautifully woven basket.
Right. He had put so much effort into making them, but he didn't stop to think about whether anyone would want to buy them.
It's like he built a better mousetrap, but no one came.
Exactly. It's a brilliant anecdote because Thoreau uses it to reflect on his own writing. He had created something beautiful, his words,
Right.
but he hadn't figured out how to make them valuable to others.
So even Thoreau, this champion of self-reliance, realized that it's not just about doing your own thing in isolation. It's also about understanding the needs of others.
And finding a way to contribute to the world in a meaningful way.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about quiet desperation and pushing barns uphill and the importance of understanding your audience.
Yes.
But Thoreau took his ideas about simplicity even further. He questioned why we need all this fancy stuff.
Interesting.
Houses, furniture, clothing, all of it.
He was a minimalist before it was cool.
He really was.
Right.
He saw material possessions as a trap.
A trap.
Yeah, think about how weighed down we feel by our stuff.
You know, the clutter in our homes, the pressure to keep up with the Joneses.
It's exhausting.
It can be.
Thoreau believed that true wealth wasn't about what you owned, but about what you could afford to let go of.
That's a good point.
And then he says this:
What?
a man is rich in proportion to the number of things which he can afford to let alone.
Wow.
That's pretty radical.
It is.
What if true wealth lies in experiences and relationships?
And personal growth.
Right, not in a pile of stuff.
It's a question worth asking.
Especially in a world that's always pushing us to buy more.
For sure.
He was all about intentional living, you know?
I can see that.
He wasn't against material things. He was pro, meaning
He had his priorities straight.
he wanted to strip away the unnecessary and focus on what truly matters.
And a big part of that was his connection to nature.
Absolutely.
Throughout Walden, Thoreau describes his surroundings in such vivid detail.
Yeah.
The pond, the changing seasons, the wildlife.
He was a keen observer.
Yeah, he wasn't just looking at nature, he was experiencing it fully.
You can tell.
Right.
He talks about the auroral light filtering through the trees and feeling connected to this untouched part of the universe.
Beautiful.
His writing is so evocative, you can practically feel the crisp air and hear the birds chirping.
I know what you mean.
And then there's his daily ritual of bathing in the pond.
Yes.
He didn't just see it as a way to get clean.
It was more than that.
He called it a religious exercise.
Wow.
He believed that connecting with nature was essential for our well-being.
On every level.
Exactly. So we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
From Thoreau's idea of quiet desperation to his experiments in simple living and his profound connection with nature.
But the question is, how does all of this apply to us today?
That's what we'll explore in part 2.
Looking forward to it. You know, it's easy to think of Thoreau as this, like, out-of-touch hermit.
Right.
But his observations about human nature are actually still really relevant today.
I agree.
Take his views on technology, for example.
Okay.
He wasn't a fan of the so-called modern improvements of his time. He felt like they often distracted people from more important things.
What did he say about the telegraph?
Oh, he had this great line.
Yeah.
He compared it to, like, two people shouting gibberish at each other across the ocean.
That's hilarious.
But it's also kind of brilliant.
Right.
Makes you think about our obsession with instant communication today.
Totally.
Are we really connecting with each other in a meaningful way? Or are we just filling the airwaves with noise?
That's the question he makes us ask.
Yeah, he wasn't anti-technology.
Right.
But he wanted people to be mindful about how they used it.
To make sure it enhanced their lives and didn't just complicate them.
Exactly.
That's something we still struggle with today.
For sure.
In our world of social media and 204/7 news cycles, are we using technology or is it using us?
That's a good question.
He was all about going deeper, wasn't he?
He was.
He believed that real adventure wasn't about traveling to far-off places.
Right.
It was about exploring the inner landscape of our own minds and hearts.
And he saw nature as this incredible mirror.
Oh, yeah.
Reflecting our deepest thoughts and emotions back to us.
Which leads us to one of the most powerful images in Walden.
Okay.
His description of waking up in his cabin bathed in the auroral light of dawn.
Beautiful.
He compares this experience to being awakened by one's own genius.
Interesting.
That's like a metaphor for the potential that exists within each of us.
It is.
He believed the morning was a time for renewal, for connecting with that spark of creativity and purpose within.
Makes sense.
And that daily ritual of bathing in the pond wasn't just about hygiene.
No.
It was a symbolic act of cleansing the mind and spirit.
Like washing away the distractions of the previous day.
And preparing for a fresh start.
He even quoted an inscription on an ancient Chinese king's bathtub.
Really?
Yeah, he said, "Renew thyself completely each day, do it again and again and forever again."
Wow.
It's about this continuous process of self-improvement, the effort to grow and evolve throughout our lives.
You know, we tend to picture Thoreau as this solitary figure.
Yeah, the lone wolf in the woods.
But he wasn't completely against human interaction.
He wasn't.
He understood that even the most self-reliant individual is still part of a community.
He did.
He even joked about how his townsmen never elected him to public office.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he implied that maybe he hadn't made his contribution to society appealing enough.
Interesting.
So it's not just about self-reliance.
Right.
It's also about finding a balance.
Between cultivating our inner resources and engaging with the world.
Exactly. So let's bring this back to you, the listener.
Okay.
In our world of constant connectivity and information overload, what parts of Thoreau's philosophy resonate most with you?
Simplicity, self-reliance, connection to nature.
This is where the real deep dive begins.
It is.
Thoreau gives us a framework for examining our own lives, our choices, our definition of success.
It's about thinking about what really matters.
Right. It's not about copying his Walden experiment exactly.
No.
But about applying those principles to our own unique situations.
Maybe it's incorporating more mindfulness into your day.
Or making time for nature.
Decluttering your home.
Questioning your career path.
Pursuing a creative passion.
Rethinking your relationship with technology.
Right.
Or maybe it's as simple as waking up a little earlier.
Enjoying a quiet cup of coffee.
Just being present.
Before the demands of the day take over.
Exactly. The key is finding your own Walden Pond moments.
Those spaces in your life where you can connect with yourself.
Cultivate inner peace.
And live with more intention.
So as you reflect on Thoreau's experiment and his critique of modern society,
what stands out to you as being particularly relevant today?
What parts of his message really hit home?
You know what strikes me is his ability to find contentment and meaning in a life stripped of excess.
He wasn't chasing wealth or status.
He was driven by curiosity.
And a desire to live in alignment with his values.
He reminds us that true wealth isn't about money.
It's about the richness of your experiences, your relationships, and your inner life.
Living with purpose, not just accumulating possessions.
He wasn't advocating for a life of poverty.
Right.
He was advocating for a life of intention.
Making conscious choices to prioritize what truly matters.
Over the allure of material gain.
Yeah.
That's a powerful message.
Especially in a world that often equates success with money and achievement.
It makes you wonder if maybe we're not as rich as Thoreau was in his simple cabin in the woods.
It's a question worth pondering.
So far, we've explored Thoreau's reasons for seeking a simpler life.
His meticulous expense log.
His thoughts on self-reliance and freedom.
And the importance of nature.
We've also touched on his critique of technology and consumerism.
And how those themes resonate in the 21st century.
But there's one more fascinating aspect of Thoreau's philosophy that we need to delve into.
And what's that?
His views on philanthropy and social reform.
Ooh, this is where things get really interesting.
And maybe even a little controversial.
Hold on to your hats, folks.
This is where Thoreau really shakes things up.
We'll be right back to explore this after a quick...
Just kidding.
Oh.
We're diving right in.
Okay, let's go.
Stay with us. Okay, so we're back and ready to tackle a part of Thoreau's philosophy that might surprise you.
Oh, really?
Yeah, remember, this is the guy who wrote Civil Disobedience.
Right, the essay that inspired activists like Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr.
to challenge unjust laws.
To take a stand.
So when it came to philanthropy and social change, Thoreau didn't exactly go for the easy answers.
Yeah, he wasn't a fan of just throwing money at problems.
Right.
He believed that real change required something more.
Like what?
A shift in perspective, a commitment to personal accountability.
Interest.
He wanted people to look inward before trying to fix the world around them.
He was pretty critical of those who tried to do good without acknowledging their own flaws.
Oh, yeah.
Or examining how they might be contributing to the problem that they were trying to solve.
Right. It's like looking in the mirror first.
Exactly.
For Thoreau, true social reform started with individual transformation.
He even suggested that those who made big donations to charities might actually be perpetuating the very issues they were trying to address.
Wow.
He argued that focusing on those surface-level acts of charity allowed people to avoid the harder work.
The work of dismantling the systems that create poverty and inequality.
And he wasn't buying into the whole sympathy thing either.
No.
He thought true compassion involved sharing strength and resilience.
Not just feeling sorry for those less fortunate.
Right. It's about empowering others, not just pitying them.
I love that analogy he uses.
Which one?
The person with a stomachache who sets out to reform the world.
Oh, yeah. It's hilarious.
But it really makes you think.
Does it ever feel like we're trying to fix problems outside ourselves when we haven't dealt with our own inner struggles?
All the time.
It's a good reminder that real social change requires both inner and outer transformation.
Absolutely.
We can't create a fair and just world
without first examining our own biases and acknowledging our privileges.
And challenging those systems of oppression that we might be unknowingly participating in.
Right.
And we can't forget that Thoreau didn't just talk the talk. He walked the walk.
Oh, yeah. He refused to pay taxes that supported slavery and the Mexican-American War.
He chose to go to jail rather than be complicit in a system he saw as unjust.
And his essay, Civil Disobedience, continues to inspire people today.
To stand up for what they believe in, to fight for a more just world.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Walden,
we're left with this powerful challenge.
How can we take Thoreau's principles?
Simplicity, self-reliance, connection to nature.
And integrate them into our own lives.
Not just as personal philosophies, but as catalysts for positive change.
How can we become more conscious consumers, more engaged citizens, more compassionate human beings?
How can we use our unique talents and passions to contribute to a better world?
Thoreau reminds us that if one advances confidently in the direction of his dreams and endeavors to live the life which he has imagined, he will meet with a success unexpected in common hours.
So go out there and find your own Walden Pond moments.
Embrace simplicity.
Cultivate self-reliance.
Connect with the power of nature.
And use your newfound clarity and purpose to make a difference.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Walden.
And be sure to tune in next time for another thought-provoking exploration.